Jiao is on a motorcycle, fiercely dressed like an action star protagonist in a leather catsuit, riding through a distant, cyberpunk, futuristic city. She fights off an army of gang members with their bats and manages to defeat the boss. However, it is all just a dream. Her landlady throws all her things at her, demanding that she pays her rent. The landlady kicks her out. All her things rain down, so she only collects a few. She starts a monologue about herself as she rides her motorcycle. She came to Macau 10 years ago with her father, and they came to work in a casino to fulfill their dreams of being rich and going to Las Vegas. She works in a casino hotel as a hostess and sees people losing every day. She spots people who are not regular casino gamblers, those who look like thugs, and those who are real players. She watches out for them and tries to guess their worth if they are high rollers. She collects tips from customers and gives them tips on how to win the next game. It turns out Mr. Deng's luck is dependent on Jiao's insider knowledge. They enter an elevator and discuss gambling luck and how people manage to lose and win a lot of money. Mr. Deng tries to hook up with her, but Jiao reiterates that he is on his floor, subtly telling him that he should go. Meanwhile, Jiao is still in Macau playing at the casino. The dealer warns her to be careful with money because it's difficult to hold on to it, but Jiao dismisses the warning. They have a conversation in her apartment about Mr. Deng, who gave the dealer a son and a house. Jiao has always been in and out of debt, and the dealer advises her to get a mortgage, but Jiao hopes to find a boyfriend in real estate instead. The dealer tells her to grow up and get married. It is revealed that the dealer had a relationship with Jiao's father. In Hollywood, Los Angeles, a tourist busload of wealthy Chinese people tours a village where many stars stay, offering them the luxury lifestyle of renting or buying a property and staying in the US for 10 years or more. Meanwhile, a real estate agent named Daniel Luo is having an affair with a woman. He talks about coming to the US 20 years ago to learn English and how Chinese money was able to take advantage of the 2008 mortgage crisis when Americans couldn't buy houses. During one of his jobs, he gives a tour to a Chinese mother at in-law property and introduces her to potential houses. The mother is interested in good schools for her sons, as they are expected to go to top-rated universities. They inspect a house with a large backyard and a homely feel. Daniel discovers that his rival is also selling the same property. He talks to the potential buyer's son, Charlie, discussing his interests in motorcycles and F1 racing, but is completely shut down. The woman appreciates the house because the owners are a lawyer and doctor, and it's near the school. The feng shui is also great, so she wants it, but Daniel tries to undermine the property, making it seem outdated and less impressive. He likes the property owned by a Chinese couple, so he does not want to sell it to anybody. He talks to the woman while jogging and wants her to give him the listing because the owners are picky about who they sell to. The woman, however, refuses. Daniel Luo is at a diner waiting for his order when he sees the book 84 Charing Cross Road. A woman approaches him and recognizes the book from her time at Oxford. She tries to make a move on him by touching his hand and talking about literature. Daniel asks her out for a drink, but she ends up causing a scene by spilling her drink on him and accusing him of using the book to lure women. Daniel is shocked and embarrassed by the incident. Later, Daniel goes to one of the houses he is selling and sleeps in a sleeping bag there. He has no permanent house. He says that all women who read romance novels are crazy. He puts the book in an envelope with an address in London. Meanwhile, Jiao wakes up with the same book in her possession. Inside the book, there is a message, and so she and Mike the postman return the book to the London address. It turns out that the book brings misfortune to both of them, as Jiao did not include an address, but Mike writes it anyway. In the casino, Jiao joins a group to earn money. Ling tries to stop her, but she persists and goes to the table where they play Texas poker. It's a very intense game, and a player gets a strong hand. Jiao is amused and calls Zheng, an academic and a gambler whom she has known for a long time. Zheng Lai comments that Jiao is very charismatic and not a commoner. Also, Jiao is a smooth talker. He says that all their decisions are pre-calculated already and talks about the movie 21, where they calculate every move they make. He explains the whole plot on how to win every game by calculating and expecting the probability. Zheng Lai wins a lot of poker chips. Then Jiao wakes up again and takes on $1 million loan. She recruits some people to play games at the casino. Back in the US, Daniel is checking the house. However, the male owner, Grandpa Lin, does not seem convinced with Daniel's ability to sell the house. The owner is impressed with Daniel's ability to speak Spanish, which prompts him to be softer with Daniel and offers him tea. Daniel goes to the agency to get the house checked out as he wants to buy it. The book that he just sent returns to him again, and there's a letter inside. It seems that the book came from Jiao, but Daniel does not know her real identity. In the casino, Jiao and Zheng Lai play, but Lady Luck is not on their side that day. Zheng Lai becomes mad and frustrated already as he is losing money. The group argues, blaming each other about how they lost all their bets. Jiao tries to defuse the situation. She says she'll borrow more money to try again. Zheng Lai tells her that he is a risky high roller and that they don't agree with her decision. Since it was her who borrowed the money, Jiao will have to pay it alone. However, they will only help in small amounts. Jiao is shocked and sad about that, then walks away. The rest did not agree to help her pay. Helpless, Jiao goes home crying. Ling notices that she lost and tells her to stop gambling. She receives the book back again that was sent by Daniel. She reads the note there about what Daniel said earlier inserted in the back. She inspects the book, which is in English, and writes a letter answering what Daniel said about women being crazy. Unknowingly, Daniel writes back, too, in Chinese and sends back the Chinese version of the book. In the agency, the worker presents the century-old house. Daniel's plan is to tear the house apart to make two houses, but his co-worker Wesley refuses as it is a good vintage house. Later on, the elderly owner got into a vehicular accident. The grandfather shouldn't drive anymore due to his age and blood pressure. The road is a mess, and Daniel assists them. The car collided into the house wall. He checks the insurance and finds that they have to change it as something is wrong. It is costly. Grandmother is crying because of the house. Daniel asks who owns the house, and it is under Grandpa's name. Grandpa tries to console Grandma. She cries because Grandpa is reckless, and now they don't even have insurance. Daniel continues to push them to sell the house to him with the perfect opportunity, that they need money, and the house is very costly to keep up. However, Grandfather says that Daniel has no wife and children, so he does not want to sell it to him. Daniel also mistakes that their grandson is dead, because Grandpa said that he is up there, but he is actually a NASA astronaut. Grandpa invites Daniel into his study. He writes a calligraphy letter that is supposed to be translated for his grandson to understand. Daniel translates it with its contents about a son leaving home. Daniel recognizes Chinese classics. Grandpa discusses his experiences with writing, and he seems to be educated, but he admits being illiterate. They didn't teach their grandson how to write in Chinese. Grandma is relaxed now and serves them beverages. In his agency, Daniel translates the whole letter to be sent to the son. Later, he receives another letter which was poorly written in Chinese by Jiao. He writes back, imagining her to be a bookkeeper in London. He berates her for being ignorant about what she knows about love. The letter is sent back to Jiao, and she responds again, thinking Daniel is in London. She imagines him to be an old professor in a British university, and an awkward creep. They continually insult each other through their correspondence. They also discuss the contents of the book about the correspondence of two characters in the book titled 84 Charing Cross Road Street. In this book, two characters Helene and Frank corresponded for 2 decades without seeing each other. Daniel is distracted while waiting for the next mail and at the same time planning to fix the house. It seems that both have opposite opinions about love. Daniel refuses to be emotionally attached, but Jiao is seemingly romantic and positive about romantic relationships. Daniel teaches Grandpa how to drive their new car, but the latter is being stubborn and shows off his driving skills. He doesn't want the younger man to teach him how to drive, but Grandma is worried about him. To see if he is still fit to drive, they take him for a test drive. However, Grandpa drives very fast, almost giving the driving instructor a heart attack due to his reckless driving. They argue and fight, but Grandma finds the situation amusing. Daniel eventually drives them back home. During their drive, they talk about their married life and how they almost got divorced before. Grandpa suggests that Daniel should buy their groceries from now on, and the latter agrees. However, Daniel still asks them to sell the house to him. But Grandpa refuses, citing his no wife, no deal policy. Daniel talks with his girlfriend, and she reveals that she is getting married to someone named Mike. Daniel congratulates her, even though he knows that she once wanted to marry him. He realizes that he is emotionally unavailable. Heartbroken, he drives away and writes to Jiao again, as he is concerned that she hasn't written back. Daniel ends up sleeping in one of the houses he is selling. The creditor asks her to play again after she paid $100,000, and pressures her to pay the rest. The creditor stalks Jiao at home trying to intimidate her into paying back what she owed. She bikes away. She goes gambling again hoping to earn money. Jiao is having financial problems and all her clients are struggling. She tells the creditor that if he pushes her, she might do something drastic. She goes home. Jiao is very disappointed that her business is weak. Ling tells her to be wise about money and stop wasting time gambling and losing money. Someone calls and Ling senses that Jiao is in trouble. Jiao leaves the casino hotel and tries to drive away, but the creditor catches onto her with other dangerous-looking men. They engage in a chase, and Jiao manages to evade them. They threaten that they will wait for her at her home. Mr. Deng calls her to play. Jiao's luck is turning around. She tries to get money from him through payments or borrowing. Deng attempts to seduce Jiao by asking her to bring his jacket to his hotel room. Jiao knows what he is doing, so she is vigilant. Jiao goes to his room and sees the chips on the table. She takes them. Then she has an imagination of her interaction with Daniel as an old professor in London. However, this is just her conscience and her troubled state of mind bugging her. In Jiao's mind, Daniel tells her that she is doing something dangerous to her life that she won't escape from. Jiao doesn't heed the warning and runs away with the stolen chip. Mr. Deng comes back and sees the chip back on the table. She is still in the room and implies that she returned the chip she stole. As Jiao tries to leave the room, Mr. Deng corners her and tries to persuade her to join him for a New Year trip to Las Vegas. However, Jiao declines his offer as she is not interested in him. She chooses to stay in Macau and returns home safely. When Jiao reaches her apartment at night, she is shocked to find blood smeared all over the door. but upon entering, she discovers that it's just red paint. Inside, she confronts a group of unruly kids who belong to the man she owes money to. The boy threatens to beat Jiao, but she stands up for herself and takes away their toys. Jiao punishes the kids by making them read books aloud. Later, Jiao visits her Aunt Ling during her dinner and is dismayed to find her badly beaten up. She apologizes to her aunt and remembers the time when debt collectors them. Jiao is regretful for allowing this to happen to her aunt and slaps herself in frustration. Determined to protect her family, Jiao calls the debt collectors and warns them not to harm Aunt Ling. Eventually, Jiao agrees to accompany Mr. Deng to Las Vegas but conceals the true story from Daniel, whom she writes to about her situation. Meanwhile, in Las Vegas, Daniel surprises his grandparents with a joyride around the city. Grandma is delighted by the sights and sounds, and Daniel makes sure they have a great time. Grandpa takes a chance at gambling. At the same time, Jiao and Mr. Deng are also in Las Vegas, trying their luck at the casinos. However, Mr. Deng's inappropriate advances towards Jiao leave her feeling uncomfortable and powerless. Jiao and Mr. Deng are left alone in a hotel room. Mr. Deng tries to get closer to Jiao, then tells her that he knows things about her like when she was younger. It is revealed that Jiao confronted the thugs and debtors who were harassing her father and family. They tried to pay off their debts, but her father died next to a slot machine, leaving Jiao with a lot of debts. She promised herself never to be in debt again, but unfortunately, she failed. Jiao breaks down in tears while Mr. Deng comforts and holds her. She writes to the imaginary professor about relationships, especially when money is involved, tricking herself into thinking that it is a business trip and nothing personal. Meanwhile, Daniel attends a book reading and exhibition by Helene from the book. He starts writing a letter to Jiao on a napkin, telling her that words do not last long. He talks about gambling for life and how the author gambled her earnings to meet Frank, as stated in the book. Jiao receives a call from the debtor, who tells her that Aunt Ling is beating one of the kids. Jiao instructs him to take the debtor's kids home. Mr. Deng comes out, and Jiao tells him about her debt. Mr. Deng intends to give her a total of $1 million, but instead of giving her the full amount at once, he gives her a breakdown of the payment plan. He starts by giving her a check for $200,000 immediately, and then he will give her one additional check of $200,000 each day for the next 5 days, until the full amount of $1 million has been paid. Jiao writes a promissory letter to return the money and goes out into the streets crying, feeling sorry for herself for trading her dignity for money. She inadvertently passes by Daniel and the grandparents, who are looking at the Buzz Lightyear movie billboard on a building on the street. Daniel takes his grandparents to their next destination, a Vegas wedding chapel. He tries to convince his grandpa to get married, as they have been married for 70 years, but never in America. Eventually, Grandpa agrees, but there is an issue with the wedding attire. In Chinese customs, white is not the color for weddings because it is usually reserved for funerals. Red is the traditional color for weddings, and Daniel solves the problem by getting them red attire. The wedding proceeds, and Jiao arrives at the chapel, witnessing the second wedding of the grandparents. She sits behind Daniel. Grandpa gives a vow speech about how much he loves his wife and how important she is to him. He promises to take care of her until one of them dies. Grandma is ecstatic with the renewal of vows, but Jiao exits the chapel crying. Jiao steps outside and imagines Daniel as a professor, who gives her hope to keep going in life. She sticks with her dream of being a cool and skilled gambler, just like she was when she was younger. She goes on a winning streak in poker and decides to bet all her chips on the bank for one more game. She makes a critical decision during her hand and finally wins the game, doubling her money. She then returns the money to Mr. Deng, feeling insulted that he only sees her as a business transaction. To prove that he values her as a woman, Mr. Deng invites Jiao to go to Nasdaq with him, but she politely declines, not liking the way he phrased his intentions. She thanks him politely but firmly, and Mr. Deng tries to make things right by apologizing. However, Jiao has made up her mind and tells him that she wants nothing to do with him anymore. After treating the grandparents to a wedding reception dinner, Daniel has a change of heart and decides not to buy the house, as he believes it's worth selling to a nice family. When Grandpa confronts him about his plan to get them to agree to sell the house, Daniel realizes the gravity of his actions. He had Grandpa sign a waiver to give up his rights to the house and use the wedding as a tool to have the certificate make the house their conjugal property, so that Grandma could sign it when Grandpa didn't agree to. Feeling the weight of his mistakes, Daniel imagines Jiao in London as he swims, acknowledging his regrets to her. However, fate brings them together again as he coincidentally passes by Jiao writing by the poolside. They hold hands with their imagined alter egos of each other, and Jiao offers to return the favor by helping him. Daniel admits that he's always afraid and keeps his distance from those around him to protect himself from getting hurt, leading to a dull and unfulfilling life. After their conversation, Jiao and Daniel continue to ponder the possibility of meeting each other. As Daniel checks out of his hotel room, he discovers that the receptionist left 3 3D glasses in the room, which he takes with him. He writes to Jiao once again, expressing his desire to learn more about her and meet her in person. Jiao books a flight back to Macau on New Year's Eve, eager to finally meet Daniel. Despite not knowing each other's true identities, they continue to exchange letters throughout the year. Daniel mentions the story of Helene and Frank, who corresponded for 2 decades without ever meeting. One day, Daniel passes by the Lin's house and sees an ambulance taking Grandpa Mr. Lin to the hospital. He rushes to the hospital to check on them, but Grandma suggests that he doesn't need to see Grandpa. Instead, Mrs. Lin gives him a letter written by Grandpa, which contains a quote, letter, and advice. In the following scene, Daniel is seen providing house tours to clients on a bus in a village, instead of using his car. As he passes by the old house, he reflects on how he has tried his best to correct his mistakes, but has still failed, leaving him in a difficult place. One of Daniel's clients, Mrs. Wang, approaches him for assistance with her son Charlie, who is experiencing emotional issues at school. They suggest that Charlie needs to see a psychiatrist, but Daniel warns Mrs. Wang not to trust American doctors. Despite this, Mrs. Wang is upset as her personal and professional life is being affected. Daniel accompanies Charlie on a school bus ride and on a camping trip with his class, where he observes Charlie playing games while other fathers and sons set up their tents. Charlie appears to be emotionally disconnected and numb. Daniel attempts to understand Charlie's situation and encourages him to work hard and turn his life around, sharing his own experiences of studying hard to immigrate to the US. Even though Charlie seems disinterested in his advice, Daniel persists in trying to convince him to change his ways. In a conversation between Daniel and Charlie, Charlie reveals his desire to migrate to America and asks Daniel if he is lonely. Daniel suggests that Charlie should share his aspirations with his mother, but Charlie is doubtful as he believes that adults do not listen to children. Daniel understands that Charlie's problem is being homesick. After Jiao returns to Macau, Aunt Ling expresses her concern for her. Jiao imagines talking to Professor Daniel and mentions that if they keep writing letters, she might fall in love with him. While walking around, Jiao notices a man reading a book in a casino, and she strikes up a conversation with him because she finds it unusual. They walk across the bridge and talk about romantic books. Jiao asks the man if he has written letters to someone before, and he reveals that he did when he was younger. Jiao writes a letter to Professor Daniel about meeting someone new and what they talked about, hoping that it was him. Jiao and the man continue to grow closer and eventually start a romantic relationship. Meanwhile, back in the US, Daniel continues to advise Mrs. Wang on how to help Charlie adjust to life in America. They find new houses and a new school where there are Chinese kids. Daniel suggests that Mrs. Wang go back to China for the Lunar New Year and advocates for Charlie to reconnect with his past life in China as he is a very good student, which might help him. Charlie seems happy about it, even though he does not show his appreciation. Later, Charlie gets a motorbike, and he becomes livelier. Jiao continues to work at the casino in Macau, where she encounters the man who had given an older woman a shawl. They have a private conversation, during which Jiao learns that the man is already married. Although he apologizes for his behavior, Jiao does not want to make a big deal out of it and accepts his apology. The man expresses his appreciation for Jiao's love of literature and their time together, but Jiao insults the wealthy and intelligent for treating lower-class individuals poorly. She walks away from him. Jiao writes to Daniel, expressing her pain from the man's treatment. Daniel replies, discussing the concept of love. During Lunar New Year, Daniel celebrates alone, purchasing food from a restaurant. He tells Jiao that he feels lonelier during the New Year, especially as an immigrant, and asks about her family. Jiao reveals that her only family is Aunt Ling, her father's ex-girlfriend. During the Lunar New Year, Jiao has dinner with Aunt Ling and her son, while Daniel spends it alone on the beach. Later, Mrs. Lin invites Daniel to a New Year's dinner, and he accepts the invitation. At the Lin household, they finally fix their television, and Daniel learns that he is not the only one who feels lonely during the holidays. He opens up to Jiao about his true identity, and she does the same. One day, Mrs. Lin wakes up Daniel because something might have happened to Mr. Lin. Unfortunately, Grandpa Lin has passed away, and they return to their hometown in China to scatter his ashes in the river in Yicheng. They give him a proper burial and show their respect, and Grandma Lin gives Daniel the deed to the house. She asks for a decent price for her to stay in for the rest of her life, and implores him not to tear down the property because of its good feng shui. After many years, Daniel reconciles with his parents and visits them while in China. Despite sending letters to each other many times, neither Jiao nor Daniel ever received them, leaving them both feeling anxious and wondering what had happened to their pen pals on the other side of the world. Jiao's depression returns as she longs to hear from Daniel, while Daniel also feels sad and uncertain about the nature of their interaction. Eventually, Jiao receives a letter from someone else, and she decides to travel to London to visit the place where the characters in the book had met, 84 Charing Cross Road. Daniel also goes to the bookstore, only to find it empty. However, a woman informs him that the owner has passed away and that the place is up for sale. Daniel inquires about Thomas, and the woman gives him the address of the funeral. At the funeral, it is revealed that Mr. Thomas had been acting as a mediator between couples by exchanging their letters on their behalf. He is responsible for many couples to find their one true love because Mr. Thomas helped ship them together. His lawyer reads a letter in which Mr. Thomas apologizes for his actions and admits to helping fulfill the destinies of others. Jae-ho attends the funeral in search of Daniel, while Daniel arrives late and checks the sympathy cards. He sees one that he believes was written by Jae-ho and writes to her using her nickname, Little Shrimp. Jae-ho hails a cab in front of a TV billboard which has Daniel raise a placard sending a message to Jae-ho that he is in London, too. Unfortunately, Jae-ho doesn't notice it, and she leaves London feeling dejected, thinking that their correspondence has come to an end. However, Jae-ho changes her mind and asks the driver to turn around on the way to the airport. She holds a letter in her hand and returns to the bookstore in a last-ditch effort to send the letter and hope that Daniel will receive it. The store is in a state of chaos as people prepare to sell it. But Jae-ho approaches the man inside, who turns out to be Daniel himself. Jae-ho gives him the letter and speaks to him in Chinese. Daniel recognizes the envelope addressed to the professor and realizes that the woman standing in front of him is Little Shrimp. Jae-ho has the same realization, and they both tear up with joy as they finally find each other. They hug in relief that their correspondence has not been in vain and begin to talk as they walk along the River Thames, quickly hitting it off.